Hey guys, what's up? It is Ripe again, back with more revenge stories. In today's video, OP's boss takes away his livelihood, OP then sends him on what is essentially a luxury vacation, and the boss ends up losing everything. Without wasting any more time, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is an absolutely outstanding pro-revenge story posted by user CallMeSwellington, and it is titled I was fired for inadvertently stumbling on my boss's malfeasance. I used his obsession with golf and watches to get him fired. This was in the last throes of the analog mid-90s. Fax machines, FedEx, dial-up computing, and voicemail were the most common business tools. I was a young regional sales manager for a major branded consumer product. I covered the grocery class of trade in 11 western states. My division worked out of Chicago and I had a home office on the West Coast. I had made my reputation by typically making my quota and keeping costs within budget. I would get reassigned to struggling markets and more often than not, I would usually make my sales number. Nothing too fancy, I just figured where the best opportunities were and concentrated on them. In those days, we had something called Market Development Funds, MDF, or as we called it, making days fun in the time before such things were deemed illegal. It was money we could literally use for almost anything you could imagine, wining and dining, sending buyers to the Super Bowl, taking them on market research trips, aka I once took 6 honchos for a weekend of fishing in Mexico. As long as you had the receipts and your boss knew, except in cases where they specifically asked not to know, we were free to spend money as we saw fit. This was old school Mad Men style slush funds, all tax deductible. Typically, the MDF money was 2% of your total annual gross sales and was use it or lose it, meaning it had to be spent because it would not roll over. I always had some left over. As a team player, I would let my boss, Sasquatch, know, so he could use it. No big deal. Towards the end of the year, my weekly FedEx pack from the company started including sign-offs for payments to a supplier I had never heard of before. What was weird is they were for a demo company that was not one of my regional suppliers. If you have ever been offered a sample or a coupon in a grocery store, that was a demo company. I called the broker/agent in that market and learned that they had never used the company or even heard of them before. I finally figured out that they were from Sasquatch, OP's boss, and that he had thrown them in with my other sign-offs. I called him and asked if he knew what they were. He said that they should be assigned to my MDF and not to worry about them. This was a little unusual because demos would normally be taken out of other monies or came down from marketing. Whatever, I signed off on them. The next chapter of the story is titled Hung Out to Dry. About 3 months later, I was called into HQ for a meeting where I was told I was being transferred to a market that I had never worked before and would be required to relocate. At the time, my wife was pregnant, read her pro-revenge story in my feed, and we just started an extensive remodel on our newly purchased house. The company had some relocation benefits, but it was just too hectic to pull up roots and move to the southeast. I declined the offer and was told that I could look for another job within the company or receive a severance package. I wound up taking the severance. The next chapter is titled The Truth Comes to Light. Several months later, one of my ex-coworkers told me that my region had been taken over by one of Sasquatch's past work associates who he managed to get hired in my spot, and that the region was tanking. Badly. Nothing made sense. Why was I terminated and then replaced by someone who lived in another city and who couldn't do the job? I started to think in my naivety that I may have put a target on my back. After some research and digging, which was much harder before the internet, I learned that the demo company billing the MDF was based in my ex-boss's previous city and was just a PO box, a telephone, and a DBA registered by the new person in my job. I later found out it was actually his girlfriend/mistress. And I suppose, guys, in this case by his girlfriend he means that it was the boss's girlfriend/mistress. Anyway, I was livid. Like most people, I tend to plan revenge in my head, but never really go through with it. Most of the time, it is a coping mechanism and not very useful in moving on past being wronged, but this was so egregious, so uncalled for, and so disruptive to my life that I felt I had to get even. My plan evolved to take this guy down, whatever the time it took. Whatever the cost in lives or money, I was going to get this dude. I may have been able to rat him out to the company, but they might have dismissed my complaint as coming from a disgruntled ex-employee with an axe to grind. The hook. I decided that I was going to approach the guy as a phony recruiter, not just a guy collecting resumes, but as a retained corporate headhunter, someone paid to onboard people for big jobs. I had spent a year early in my career working for a super exclusive headhunting firm and knew exactly what transpired in the process. My subterfuge required international telexes, phony letterhead, faked English accents, and overseas friends to do my bidding. Sasquatch was obsessed with expensive watches and golf. He played regularly and watched pro golf both on TV and live. He would incessantly chatter on about both subjects. To bait him, I arranged for him to be approached for an executive position with a major Swiss watch company for a position tied to pro golf and other swanky sports sponsorships, and included a shopping list of benefits and perquisites. The job would require hobnobbing with major sports organizers flying around the world, first class, and basically spending money. It was a job he could only dream of. The setup: in the slow and methodical long con, I strung him along until the time was right to close with an offer. The only catch was that he had to report to Switzerland for a final offer and onboarding. I deliberately scheduled it for the week of the old jobs division meetings and reporting. They were mandatory and impossible to miss without raising red flags. Sasquatch was worried that his absence would be impossible to cover, especially if he was out of the country. The headhunting firm said they could move the appointment up a few days so that he would be able to attend his meeting, but that he would need to purchase an unrestricted business class seat and make his own hotel reservations. Save your receipts, and the watch company will reimburse you, he was told. Sasquatch showed up to this swanky hotel suite using his own credit card for the big expensive room and promptly received a note from the watch company that his appointment had to be rescheduled for the following Monday because of a major corporate crisis. Sasquatch called the phony recruiter in a panic about missing the corporate meetings back in the States. It was agreed that he would call in sick and that whatever happened with the old job, he was heading to much greener fairways. Enjoy your weekend in Europe. By Monday, you will be in your dream job. And now, the sting. While Sasquatch was cooling his jets in Europe, I nonchalantly called his boss, the president of the division, and casually asked for a reference on Sasquatch's work ethic and dates of employment. You would be surprised how often this mistake happens. The president, to his credit, did not tip his hand or act very surprised by the call, but like a good corporate wonk, he referred me to human resources. I let it slip that he was in Europe finalizing his new job and that he had already given the company notice. My bad. And now, the bloody aftermath and how the revenge overstepped its original mission. Eventually, I was able to put together the aftermath from old co-workers and other people in the trade who did not know I was the revenge ninja. When Monday came and went, Sasquatch must have been apologetic. This is to be assumed since we had cut all communications to let him twist in the wind, because we received at least 20 calls to the exchange and multiple faxes. Sasquatch hung around the hotel for a day or two and then finally decided to leave for home. I assume at some point he may have contacted the watch company, but I never confirmed it. When he finally got home, he found his office had been packed up and left with his wife. An HR person met him off-site to give him his severance and retrieve the car and other company property. I heard his wife left him sometime later and his mistress was fired for theft. I figure he spent at least 10k on travel and hotels. Epilogue: I wish I could say I tipped my hand and told Sasquatch that I was the author of his demise, but it really served no purpose and in theory may have exposed me to some retribution of my own. By my moral lodestar, I got even with a thief who was content to steal and take my livelihood. That was plenty. And ripe stars, I gotta say, this was a crazy good revenge story. Just thinking about how OP essentially planted the thoughts of hope and excitement in the boss's head, how he must have fantasized about his new dream job and how amazing his life will be, then even traveled across the world on his own dime and ditched his old job just to essentially end up with nothing. If you have enjoyed this revenge story, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support the channel. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is from r/PettyRevenge and it is titled "Steal my tools and be a dick? Prepare to be inconvenienced for eternity." I am a mechanic, and if you have worked in a trade, you know your coworkers can be awesome or they can be dicks. Most of the guys I work with are great, some I really like, some I cannot stand. One of the guys, let's call him Jay, is an old crotchety, condescending and just generally butthole. Some of his crimes include hoarding shop tools and never putting them away when he is finished. There is one bay in the shop that his crap is all spread over. It is his bay, his airline, his bench, etc. The other day I was under a truck using one of the shop's impact guns. We have several, but one is newer than the rest and the rest are pretty crappy. So when it is free, I always grab it when I need it. If someone is using it, I will grab one of the others and deal with it. While I was working away, I set it down for a minute. Jay walks by and just grabs it. I roll out from under the truck and tell him, "Hey, I am still using that." He keeps walking and says, "Well, I need it," and just left. So I waited and watched until he stepped away from his job and took it back. He came back and got pissed at me. I have had enough of his BS at this point. So I have started screwing with him every day when I walk by his bay. I will take the opportunity when he is not in the bay. If he is using air tools, I will turn off the valve to the airline. If he leaves electric tools out, I will take the battery off and set it no more than a foot away. Same with sockets on his ratchets, just enough to be annoying and inconvenient, not enough to be malicious. But I hope it is making his day slightly crappier. And ripe stars, I would love to hear from you. Did you ever have any awful colleagues and have you messed with them in some kind of way? Or has anyone ever messed with you in a petty way? Feel free to share your own stories either in the comments or on r/ripe stories on Reddit, which is our own subreddit. The next one is titled "Take my trash can and replace it with yours? Nope." I live in a unit complex. There are 20 units with an assortment of entitled crazies and petty people, with me being the pettiest of the bunch. There are up and downstairs units, with each downstairs unit having a red bin, green bin and a yellow recycling bin, and the upstairs units having a red and yellow bin. Here is the problem with the bins. My neighbors are selfish and entitled, which is why every downstairs unit has their own green bin now instead of the one green bin we used to share. A story for another day. There are 20 units but only 10 allocated parking spaces, which causes another problem with the bins. The only place to put the bins for collection is along the street where my neighbors park their cars. Because of this, my bins are not always collected because there was a car impeding the truck. Annoying, but whatever. It is what it is. Until last week when I was late to collect my bins. When I went out to get it, my red bin was there, empty, but my yellow bin had been replaced with a full yellow bin, complete with a sticker from the council saying they won't collect it because it is full of trash. So not only did I not have my bin, but I couldn't use it as it is full to the brim with their trash. I had been stewing on this all week until yesterday when my pettiness got the better of me. I went around the units in search of my bin and I found it. They didn't even try to change the unit number, so the search didn't take long. The type of person they are was very telling when I saw the state of their backyard. As quietly and discreetly as possible, I took my bin and replaced it with theirs. But not before drawing a massive smiley face with a Sharpie on top of their bin to share the love. And you know guys, speaking about trash and bins, a few days ago something kind of embarrassing happened to me. As some of you might know, I live in quite a big condo here in Thailand, in Bangkok. And usually when you order food, they leave it at the entrance of the condo building. And I think in total there are like 4 or 5 condo buildings. So anyway, in the morning I ordered something, I go down and I pick up my food. Then I'm in the elevator and close to my room again, and then I notice what I picked up was actually not my own order. It was a similar restaurant, but it was like 3 or 4 portions and I only ordered 2 portions. So now I go back down and place the food where it belonged and pick up my own food, which has arrived by now. So now the thing is that food that I mistakenly took is still there at the same place 5 days later, and seemingly nobody is, I suppose, brave enough to pick it up and throw it away. But I gotta say guys, I was super happy that nobody saw me, because that would have been such an embarrassing situation. Jesus Christ. And the next one is titled, "Keep reporting us because you set your tent up too close and you're gonna have a bad night." Every summer from May until the end of September, my family, hubby, kid and me, and 2 other families, one with 2 kids and one with no kids, go camping about every other weekend or so. We always have a great time together. We camp close to the river so the kids can swim and the guys can fish. There are small rapids close by that we walk down to and float back to camp during the day. At night we build the bonfire and the adults sit around talking and having a few drinks while the kids pile up in a tent to hang out or go exploring close by with flashlights to see what is out at night. We always put our tents close together, but as far away from the edges of the site as possible so we can have some privacy and don't disturb other campers. The campground rules state that quiet time runs from 10 PM to 6 AM. We have been going on these trips for several years and never had any problems or issues with other campers or campground staff. Over this past summer we were camping and someone pulled into the campsite next to ours pretty late. Maybe it was around 7 to 8 PM, but set their tent up on part of our site and immediately went into their tent. They had a kayak on their vehicle and we assumed they were gonna have an early morning, so we didn't say anything about it to them since it was late, dark, and we didn't think it was a big deal. Fast forward to 10:05 and someone from the front desk comes to our site and tells us they had a noise complaint about our site. The guy said the staff making rounds did not hear us or feel we were being loud, but since they had someone call up there, they had to come talk to us. We apologized for any issues we may have caused and agreed to be quieter in case we were disturbing anyone. Maybe half an hour later, the guy comes back and says they had another call and asks us if we have heard any other people because he couldn't hear us until he got past our tents and thought maybe the complainer was accusing the wrong side. We kind of looked around because we haven't heard anyone else. There's a few other sites with people sitting around fires, but we hadn't heard anyone. However, as we are glancing around, I noticed that our side neighbor is peeking out their tent at us, talking to the groundskeeper. When he saw me looking, he quickly ducked back into his tent on our side, and basically dry humping our tents, which is probably why he could hear us so easily. After the groundskeeper left, I decided to look up the campground rules. Nothing about lights out, just quiet time. So I took one of our bright ass shop lights and moved it as close as possible to their tent, turned it on and left it shining like a spotlight on their tent all night long. The next morning when we all got up, they were gone. We were there for 5 more days with absolutely no issues. The next one is titled, "I had to teach my boss that even though she is my boss, I am not her secretary." I have a good boss, but sometimes you have to teach them a thing or two. My boss is becoming the bitch from micromanaging hell. Where I used to be able to do my job, I can no longer do it without constant interruptions of micromanagement. Boss has an office near mine. If I handle a business call, she listens and tries to control the call from her office. It's impossible for people to do more than one thing at a time. I cannot listen to 2 people at a time when one is on the phone. One conversation depends on verbal skills only, and the other is messed up trying to use verbal and non-verbal. The customer should be served, not the boss. I sort of have dealt with this pretty clear and clever when I am on phone with someone and eavesdropping boss starts to try to control a simple phone call with, "No, don't do that, do XYZ. Who is that? Ask them this, tell them that." I become polite, cover the phone and say to my boss that I have this handled. If boss persists with the micromanagement crap, I then cover the phone and say, "Mr. Customer, can you please hold a moment? It is too loud and busy here to understand your needs. If it is okay with you, I'm going to transfer you to my boss with a private office." Boss then says, "No, can't you see I don't have time for that call?" I then transfer the call that moment and walk away. Boss handles the call, which they wanted to do in the first place. Next time boss interrupts me on a call, I cover the phone, say, "Can you hold 1 second?" and politely ask boss, "Do you want this one?" Look at boss and wait till their attention goes back to the desk, when I then handle the call. Now that I have broken that mind-numbing habit, boss has moved to different interruptions to my workflow. He is clever, but I am more so. "Can you copy files from XYZ and scan them to me?" Over and over I hear this. Now you do things for your boss, but when they run their own small business on company time, they tend to take you on as an unwilling partner, asking you to do things they don't have time for, but then you don't have time for your job. Most of our documents are PDF and our company will not provide us the ability to edit stuff, so when I cannot get my job done, I wait till boss wants a document scanned to them. I wait for a one-pager that I know they want to use electronically. I retrieve the file, 50% of the time it is in boss's office, I pull the page they want, I then scan the damn thing. But the end of the document goes in the scanner first, so the document will go to boss upside down and not usable by them. I then announce, "I'm going on break, would you please return the document to the file?" They get the file they cannot use and I'm not there for them to ask me to rescan. Bonus revenge, boss has to go to the scanner to rescan his document. Once he handles it, he is obligated by company culture to return it to the file, so I comply with his micromanagement demands and he ends up doing what he should have done in the first place. And ripe stars, with this we have unfortunately reached the end of today's video. However, if you cannot get enough of my stories, then I would highly suggest you to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will show up at any moment in the left corner of the screen, which includes over 1000 ripe stories. In addition, if you would like to share one of your own stories, then please head on over to r/ripe stories on Reddit, where you can post your own story and there is a good chance that I might read it in a video. In addition, please also check out my Patreon at patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive Reddit videos that you won't find on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, your daily support is very much appreciated and I hope to see you again tomorrow.